Hello and welcome to the meeting room out of office at the meeting show in London. My name's James Lancaster and I'm delighted to say I'm joined in the studio by Rob Eveleigh, founder and managing director of Bright Elm, the events agency for associations. Welcome to the studio, Rob.
Thank you, James. Thank you so much for having me.
Not at all. I was in your session yesterday.
Yeah.
Very interesting session about the challenges facing associations, and specifically around their events. It is a very challenging time. They're squeezed from all sides, aren't they? Just paint a picture of what's going on here.
I think there are a number of points. So first of all, let's talk about it from an attendee point of view. Training, but in times of financial crisis, which we are verging towards on a global scale at the moment, training budgets are squeezed. We know that there's a funding crisis in UK universities, for example. So the funding for academics to attend scientific congresses is being squeezed. They're having to make choices about attending less meetings or maybe for less days. So you've got challenges of attendance and making sure that you are the meeting or you're running the meeting that people want to attend. You're being challenged from a commercial revenue perspective. So sponsors and exhibitors, we get a lot of objections about measurement of outcomes from exhibitions and sponsorship as part of meetings, which I find fascinating because we've been banging on about sponsors and exhibitors measuring their outcomes for years and years and years, and a lot of them haven't put the process in place. So we're competing in marketing spend with pay-per-click, for example. Interestingly, on the reverse side of that, with the seeming need for increased connectivity because we're in a more digital world, I think there is a realization from some sponsors that actually being present at live events is a really important part of their marketing mix. But the marketing decision makers and budget holders are struggling to convince their boards because they can't prove it. So there's the second squeeze. And then the third squeeze is from costs. So costs of venues have gone up. In the session yesterday was quite a point. It wasn't really a question, it was a statement. Venue costs have gone up, you've got to do something about that. But venues don't have a really choice about it. And venues are guided by their strategic commercial goals. It's up to them how they price their product. It's up to us as an intermediary to negotiate on that and be as flexible as we can. But they have increased food costs, increased energy costs. Staffing is still an issue in hospitality. And I think the fourth area of pressure is commercial squeeze. So you've got other associations competing for the same audience. You've got commercial organizations sometimes competing in the same space. So there's lots of squeeze on association event stakeholders.
How big a threat is that last point, the commercial? Are we seeing more commercial entities moving into what was traditionally association space in terms of the topics and the subjects that they're choosing to talk about at events?
It's really interesting because I think different types of organizers bring different things. So as and actually we have the benefit of doing both because we also have our own conference as well. So an association has the benefit of having perhaps a more trusted brand. It's a membership organization. It's volunteer led, but it can be held back by boards, by committees in decision making. And I think we still see decisions delayed and progress being delayed by the need to ratify it at committee or board, sometimes on a ridiculous scale, like the board influencing the choice of venue or even the choice of menu, which nowadays I find bizarre. I think from a commercial perspective, your advantages are that you can think quickly, you can react quickly, you can adjust. You probably have a better handle on how to market effectively because you are a commercial organization. You are in it for profit primarily. And so that's kind of the competitive edge. The discount, of course, of commercial events is you don't have that trust, that automatically trusted brand by being a volunteer-led organization. endorsement, if you like.
Sure. So associations have that golden egg of the membership. Are they leaning on that membership, or are they exploiting that enough to make their events successful? But what I mean by that is, are they listening to what their members really want? Is there a problem that's being solved at these events, or do you think we're still in that situation where associations are copying and pasting congresses from one year to the next, maybe with a different theme or a title, but basically it's the same thing, and that's just not competitive?
I think it's important not to generalize, because as with anything, you have a huge spectrum of meetings, from those associations which are still running their annual meeting, it's still called their annual meeting, up to those associations who are really striving forward and changing, perhaps creating new events, adapting to change. So there's a whole spectrum of abilities. I think and change. I think one of our biggest issues in the events industry is we are too focused on the big events. So if you think by the law of averages, the vast majority of meetings that are held are small meetings. The big congresses, which everyone talks about, the 30,000 ones like ESC, which rotates around Europe, and the 70, 80,000 at ASCO in the States, they're huge meetings. Everybody talks about them and talks about their progress and the changes they're making, but they have money to be able to do that. What we really need to be helping as an industry is those associations who maybe employ one person as their executive director. They run a meeting of 100 people. They're seeing declining numbers. They're not getting the sponsorship and exhibition figures in that they used to, because they're not embracing best practice. But I think a lot of cases, our messages in the events industry about progression aren't reaching, should we say, grassroots event conference planning for associations.
This is so true. And if you look at the ICA database, I think I did a sort of deep dive on the ICA database, and I think the average size of an international association is something between 250 and 300 people.
Yeah, but that's according to the
according to the ICA database.
Yeah. The ICA database is only as strong as the information that is put in.
But my point is, it's not thousands.
No. But that's also only international. That's only international meetings. We're in the UK market, so the vast majority of association meetings in the UK do not get measured by ICA because they don't meet the qualifying standards, or that lower benchmark. There's very little data in that regard for the UK associations market in events.
Give me a sense of the level of financial stress that some associations are under at the moment in terms of their events. I was speaking to the CEO of a medical international association the other week, who basically suggested if things don't change, her flagship congress was under serious threat, and she would have to think of a new way to raise revenues for the association. At the moment, the congress was the big it was a big revenue generator, and it was paying for lots of the education throughout the year. But she was saying this can't continue. Are you seeing that?
I'm seeing a much greater conscientiousness about revenue diversification. And I think that's post-pandemic. That's very common post-pandemic, in that people relied on the conference as their main income generator. In some instances, with some associations, they have whatever the word is for every four years, quadrennial. That Congress makes so much money for them, and that pays for the association for 4 years. That Congress doesn't exist. That association suddenly disappears. So revenue diversification is really important. I personally believe, and it is just seeing the trends that are spoken about in the industry. And we're really bad at connecting science. Given that our connection to science, we're really bad at using science in the events industry. Let's assume some of the trends are correct in terms of the challenge of running big events. The purpose of your meeting is the most paramount important thing. If you get your purpose right and you solve a problem or you fill a gap, you can probably make a return on it if you develop in the right way, and it depends on your industry too. I firmly believe the future of meetings is smaller, more specialist meetings, and that's the way to stay competitive, because these big citywide congresses are expensive. They're really expensive to run. And perhaps it's better to have 3 or 4 events a year, which are all turning a smaller profit. Then you've got a more consistent generation of cash into the organization too, rather than thinking about that annual meeting where you've got squeezed income from sponsorship, particularly in medical sector. And then you've got this awful trend of late registrations, which is driving everybody insane. Well, actually, if that's a problem, creating a problem for you in terms of planning, stop doing what you're doing automatically. Just because you've always run an annual congress doesn't mean you should continue to run that congress. And if you're struggling with it, you should really question its existence. And why not do that? What's stopping you doing that? Possibly your board saying, well, we have to have the annual congress.
Yeah, but the annual congress itself is, a lot of the times when I've been to industry association annual congresses, if you look at the age of the delegate, it doesn't really represent oftentimes the age range of an industry, does it? So maybe smaller meetings would be a way of getting that younger generation through.
I think possibly being no longer part of the younger generation, it's quite difficult for me to answer that, because I don't have lived experience of it anymore. I think one of the issues we're finding is that advisory boards aren't particularly diverse in terms of age. And really, if you want to bring in younger people, younger scientists, younger attendees, you need representation from that demographic. But from what I understand, I mean, apart from financial access and time out of the office in your early career, it's much harder to get time out to attend meetings. It's harder to ask. It's harder to be heard. But what is good is the online content is the young generation are really into online content, pure online content. And if the price is right and the price is accessible, they will pay for online content too.
Yeah.
Using the Netflix model or the Amazon model, they're really, really good. That's small amounts of revenue that you hardly notice.
That was one of the mistakes associations made in the pandemic, wasn't it? They were giving away their online content.
But if you want to engage an audience and you want them to feel part of the association, create a following, get them engaged through social media. Use TikTok, use Instagram. And we cannot afford to say, oh, I don't do TikTok, I don't do Instagram. Association can't afford to do that. If they want to engage a younger demographic to feed their future membership, they have to be feeding that demographic now.
This is probably quite a broad question, but maybe one we can sort of end on. Are you optimistic about the association sector in general as something that is relevant for the 21st century?
Oh, that's a huge question. And to put that in the context of events, we live in an increased digital world, and having live interactions, interpersonal interactions is going to become more and more important. So from an events perspective, I am optimistic, but it's got to be done in a financially accessible way, a time accessible way, and a subject accessible way too. I believe in the future of association, for sure. You could argue it's my job to say that, so that might be a slightly loaded answer, but there is a market for it. There's a need for it, but you have to adapt. If you don't adapt, you will die. It's a very somber.
Well, let's take it
somber
up towards the end then and talk about. I think it was 18 months ago now. I went to your first Evolve
Yeah,
conference. So Brighthelm runs its own association conference, and I went to it 18 months ago. I think there was a hiatus this year or last, but there's going to be another one in September, I believe.
Yeah, it wasn't really a hiatus, more of a just taking time to think and restock again, questioning. We don't necessarily have to run something every year, but what we've actually done now this week is we've launched very quietly a new community, and the community is called the Evolve Community. It's for in-house association event professionals at all career levels, and that's really, really important. We want to consider those who've been in the job for a week and those also who've been in the job for 15 years, and think about helping them connect with each other, learning from each other, because a lot of them work in silos. I was chatting to James Lee from IOM3 yesterday. Until a year ago, he didn't even know that what he did in an association was something which about 1,000 other people in the UK do. So creating a sense of a commonality and bring those people together to solve their collective problems is what we're aiming for. So we have 12 events planned over the next 12 months. We have eight webinars, one in July, one in August, and then we have Evolve Live, which is our live experience conference, which will be here at the end of September. We're hoping for around 200 event professionals there. And then we'll carry on delivering webinars, a couple of social events. Yesterday evening, in 12 months' time, we will have a meeting show, won't be branded meeting show, sorry, a meeting show meetup for the Evolve for the community. And we'll just see how it goes. I think I want to, we have to be brave. We have to experiment with things. And there's certainly a lot of desire for it to happen. So I'm optimistic.
Good. I thought the first Evolve conference was great, so I look forward to the next one.
Excellent. Good.
Rob, thanks very much for your time in the meeting room.